Greetings and welcome back to this little Tomb Raider 20th anniversary Ramble thingy. So let's go on to the Crystal Dynamics games. I have just yesterday finished playing Tomb Raider Legend. You'll be seeing that soon. And that was the first time in a long time that I had played the game, and I really enjoyed it. My memories of playing it the first time around was I came home from work on a Saturday evening. The game had arrived from Amazon. I played it through the evening, got up Sunday morning, played it again, and I was finished by lunchtime. Like, I was finished the entire game by lunchtime, and I remember the intensity of that final scene and being so pumped up and excited for what was coming next. And that was the end of the game, and I was so annoyed that the game had been over that quickly, because it is, you know, the occasional footery moment, the occasional awkward jump or dodgy little bit with the controls aside, it's a relatively straightforward, simple, easy game. There's some fun puzzles there, but there's not a huge amount of them. You know, there is a heavy focus on action and shooting, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because some Tomb Raider games are like that. You know, Tomb Raider 2 has still got a lot of puzzles, still got a lot of exploration, but there's a heavier emphasis on combat, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But it was just shocking that a Tomb Raider game should be over so quickly. I also remember being really irritated by Zip and Alistair. And to a certain extent, when I played it, when I was just playing it this week, to a certain extent I was still irritated by them, but actually I found myself laughing a lot as well. There is a lot of moments where there's a little banter between the three of them that is genuinely funny, and I love that, you know, they kind of take the mick out of Lara, and sometimes she, you know, reciprocates and takes them, but you can feel the affection between them. And actually I found myself really liking Alistair, you know, because it occurred to me this time that he and Lara are kind of similar in the sense that they clearly both come from a certain background, you know, like a certain level of privilege, that they've both probably had a similar kind of sort of Oxbridge education, but at the same time they don't really fully feel a part of that kind of a world. So, you know, like I could see that. It's just a shame that maybe what they needed to do was just to go through the game again and just refine all of that stuff, because there were times when it was like, Zip, shut up, you know, especially like during the motorbike sequences when he's like, you know, hurry up, you're not going to get to Anaya at this rate. It's like, dude, shut up. Or him going, woohoo, whenever, you know, like you jump over the bridge or something. It's like, that is incredibly distracting, and there are moments in the gameplay where Zip and Alistair become incredibly distracting. But there are other times when the banter is genuinely very funny, and you know, like I said, you can feel the affection between the three of them, which, you know, for a game that is only, my final, on the game I just finished yesterday, my final count was 6 hours. So to have 6 hours of three characters and to be able to genuinely feel the affection between them, that's actually quite an achievement. The combat is a lot of fun. I've never thought of the combat as something particularly good in the Legend series. I didn't like the adrenaline dodge in Anniversary. I didn't really like the whatever passed for combat in Underworld. But actually in Anniversary and Underworld there isn't a huge amount of combat because of the nature of those games. Like I said, there is a lot more combat in this one, and it's fun. It is genuinely fun, to the point where it was like, why don't you just keep doing that in Anniversary and Underworld? You know, like being able to like sort of run up to enemies and tackle them, you know, like sort of to kick their feet out from under them, or to be able to do that kind of Matrixy slow motion thing, because, you know, this particular point in gaming was when a lot of games were trying to mimic that kind of bullet time thing. So you know, you were kind of seeing that a lot. So maybe certainly by the time Underworld, when was Underworld, like sort of 2008, 2009, around about then, maybe it was becoming terribly cliche by that point to have the slow motion stuff, and that's why they wanted to go in a different direction. But that was another weird thing about replaying Tomb Raider Legend, is you don't think of 2004-5 being that long ago if you're my age, but throughout my playing of it, I kept finding myself saying, oh, but this is very typical of games at that time, you know. So clearly enough time has passed that I'm able to say this is representative of gaming of a certain time period. You know, for example, when the bad guys die and their gun and their grenades and their health packs all kind of just explode out from them, and you know, then you can just scoop all that up. So, but I really enjoyed Legend. It's still a short game. It's still a bit basic in terms of the Tomb Raider stuff, but you know, it was after the horror that was Angel of Darkness, getting something like Legend, which was a fun game to play, looked great, and felt more Tomb Raider-y than Angel of Darkness, it was a blessed relief, and it, you know, kind of filled me with a new feeling of hope that the next game that came along would be a really good, solid Tomb Raider experience. So that next Tomb Raider game was Tomb Raider Anniversary, a 10th anniversary remake of the original game from 1996, but the game wasn't ready in 2006, so they had to release it in 2007. Because this was back in the days when if your game wasn't ready, well, either IDOS would make you publish it, or before it was actually finished, or you would delay the game. And clearly, IDOS at this point were like, "Well, shit, we should probably delay it this time," and that was the correct decision. But I have recently replayed Anniversary, and I for the most part enjoyed it. I feel like Anniversary, of the three Legend series games, that's the one with the shonky controls. It really shows, because a lot of the stuff that they're recreating was kind of I mean, it's sort of got one foot in the past and then it's got one foot in the present, or what at the time was the present. So it kind of feels like at times the controls just aren't working for what you're expected to do. You know, like sometimes something as simple as being on top of a pillar and having to jump to another pillar was really awkward. You know, it's like Lara would veer off at an angle and then you'd plunge to your death. The room that I always think of as being the most frustrating is the Damocles room in St. Francis Folly, because you know, like so many times you get stabbed or you plunge to your death. Well, I say stabbed. This is the Legend series. Although I was actually a wee bit surprised by some of the violence in Legend. You know, there are times when you really do feel like Lara's being impaled. But I think, particularly in Anniversary, there is this kind of cartoony kind of approach to death where, you know, like they didn't want to make it too graphic, because this was a point where graphics were getting good enough that if you were to actually represent it as what was actually happening, it would be incredibly gory. So Lara kind of slides off the spikes instead of getting impaled. You know, she should get like sort of just pulverized by something, but she just kind of like like if something like two things squash into her, she just kind of falls down dead, instead of what should actually happen, which is all of our flesh and bones and all that get crushed together. But that aside, I think it is actually a pretty good remake of the original game, because what actually was fascinating, and I am planning at some point to do a video that compares and contrasts Tomb Raider and Tomb Raider Anniversary, because I think that they are both fascinating snapshots of gaming in 1996 and then gaming in 2000, like sort of the mid-90s and then the mid-2000s, and how it's changed and how the approach to gameplay and level design and all that kind of stuff has changed, or you know, the approach was taken at those particular times, I think is actually fascinating. For example, Palace Midas. So Palace Midas, you get out of that swimming pool and you've got three paths immediately obvious to you. There's the room straight ahead that you go into to go into another room with the kind of the sort of the door and the pillars and that. Off to your left, you've got the room that you go through, that you climb into another area that takes you to the Midas statue, and then to your right, you've got the room that takes you to the room with the multi-levels, and then you can also go up the stairs to take you into the room with the levers and the different doors that you go through to get the lead pipes. the first time you play this game, it took me so long to play Palace Midas the first time, because there is so much to see, there's so much to take in before you even start to think about how you approach actually tackling the level and what it is you're actually meant to do. In Anniversary, you come down some stairs. You're immediately in the room with the Midas statue. On the base, or the plinth, if you prefer. That's a great word, isn't it? Plinth. There is the spaces for the three gold bars to go into. In fact, isn't there 4 slots and there's already 1 gold bar in? So to basically be like, hint, 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 this is what you're meant to do. And then there's 3 doors in that room that take you off to the 3 places to go to get the 3 lead bars. Now, I'm not saying that one is necessarily better than the other, but what it is representative of the approach taken in both of those eras. Anniversary, for the most part, has quite a sort of stripped down, streamlined approach to the level design, where sometimes things were a bit complicated or convoluted, or there's a lot of different things that you need to go through in order to get to this thing. Anniversary tend to just streamline it down to go through this place, jump over this stuff, and then you're there. The ending of Shadow sort of hinted that Lara was about to go off and have her adventure with Natla. They changed the ending, they patched the ending so that didn't happen. And I think the official reasoning for that was they wanted to end Shadow on a positive tone. And I actually agree with that. I don't know. When I watched the video on YouTube, I kind of got the impression a lot of people preferred that original version. I think I prefer the patched version. I do prefer that kind of more upbeat ending. But I think maybe also they didn't want to sort of make people think that, oh yes, we're going to do another remake of the original Tomb Raider, because that's not going to happen. But I almost kind of want it to happen, because it would be fascinating to see that game remade again for the late 20-teens or early 2020s to once again represent how game development is changing, because you can see, or I can see, the original game being remade in the style of the Survivor series, and instead of just being in this one location or this one country for the whole game, I can see her traveling to these 4 sort of smaller locations. Like, you could see how the Peru stuff could all be done as the one big area. The original Tomb Raider lends itself to that very well, I think. But yeah, I do think that Anniversary is a fascinating way of comparing and contrasting the way games were made in the mid-90s to the way they are in the mid-2000s. So whenever I play Anniversary now, I'm kind of like, although that's interesting to compare it to the original. So that's my big takeaway from Anniversary. But I do remember even playing it at the time thinking, this is more like it. This is more like a Tomb Raider game, and it's not just a simple remake, that they do add in new things like there's new elements to traversing the environment. Like I like that she was able to stand on top of poles. I thought that was incredibly impressive for its time. So yeah, overall, I have very positive feelings about Anniversary, and I remember blogging about it all those years ago, saying that if Crystal Dynamics had spent the time revisiting the original game and remaking it, then that would help them would better inform them as to what is special about Tomb Raider, and then they could apply that going forth. And I think that is genuinely what happened. I think Tomb Raider Tomb Raider Underworld is a fantastic game. I mean, again, I've recently, about a year or so back, replayed it, thoroughly enjoyed it. They do seem to have listened to the fans where Zip and Alistair were concerned. Although that being said, now that I've played Legend again and actually liked some of the banter, I'm kind of a bit disappointed that maybe that's not there to quite the same extent with Underworld. You know, like, I'm glad that there wasn't really a lot of talking in the actual levels themselves. You know, like, it was kind of contained to cutscenes or others, you know, such sort of scripted moments, because really Tomb Raider is meant to be about Lara alone in the wilderness. But this does take a bit of a maybe that kind of sort of joking banter wouldn't really work as well with Underworld, because there is a bit of a different tone. If Legend brought a bit more warmth to Lara, because I think it did. I think that, you know, the snark, the kind of wittiness of Lara Croft is still there, but it's combined with warmth. There is a bit more darkness to Lara in this one. Well, I mean, not in the sense of shadow, but there is more of a darker tone. That, you know, things get a bit, you know, typical storytelling, things get really crap before they get better. I love the locations. The locations in this game are just gorgeous. And the thing that really blew me away playing this again after quite a few years was how well it's held up visually. I mean, it is a stunningly gorgeous game. It came out about, I think it was a year after the first Uncharted, and I replayed Uncharted Drake's Fortune about the same time that I had replayed Underworld, and I was amazed. You know, like, Uncharted still looks alright. It doesn't look as good as the later games in that series, but Underworld looks bloody amazing. I mean, you could, like, especially the was it Thailand? Was the second level. I mean, like, you can just walk around that place and you can feel the thing that I love when Tomb Raider does, which is this feeling of this place was once a grand, majestic place, and it's all just crumbled into ruins, and, you know, nature has started to creep back in. You know, you can feel the moss and all the sort of the shrubs and, like, all this kind of, like, sort of stuff, like all the grass and nature creeping back into the environment. It's gorgeous in its ruin. You know, I think that's what Tomb Raider should always aim to do, is show places that are ruined, that are old, but there's something still beautiful about them in their ruin. I love the Mediterranean Sea stuff, and there's, forget where it is that you go to in the last level. I want to say the Arctic, but I'm not 100% sure. But the levels where you are just underwater, because finally, after, what is this, 6, 7, 8, 9 games, Lara Croft has finally decided to take some underwater breathing apparatus with her, so she can just stay underwater for prolonged lengths of time, and that was so cool. That was so cool to be just swimming underwater for any length of time, because if you've ever watched any of my Let's Plays, you'll know I get a bit anxious underwater, especially if there's a feeling of being trapped underwater. I mean, I guess it's some kind of primal instinct of, oh no, I need to breathe. But no, those levels were a lot of fun to just be swimming around for prolonged lengths of time. The last time I played the game, I didn't really I had one crash, but other than that, I didn't have any major issues with bugginess. But I do remember the first time I played it on the PlayStation 3, I did have a few issues with bugs. There was one time in the last level where Lara got transported across the level, or it was in that initial section, the swimming section, that you have to get these items and place them into something, and I placed one in and then suddenly got transported back out to the bit with the statues. So that was kind of weird. So, you know, there were some weird bugs in it, but I didn't have any too many issues the last time I played it. I like the visual similarities between this and Anniversary. You know, when you get to all the Atlantean stuff in Anniversary, you've got all that kind of markings on the walls that kind of look like writing or symbols and that. And I think they were a sort of yellow tone in Anniversary, and then you see them here when you get to the last few sections, when it's when you get to all the Yggdrasil stuff or section of the game, and you start to see all those symbols appear on the walls that you're in. You realise that you're going. It's a really nice visual way, striking visual way of saying these events are actually connected. They're, you know, maybe made by the same people, or they've got a kind of origin. Because wasn't that the idea with the original Tomb Raider, that here was Atlantis and then it was destroyed, and the leaders of, you know, like was it actually Natla? At what point did Natla try to betray them or whatever? I can't. Oh, because Natla's chair was in one of the levels in Atlantis, so maybe it was sometime after they left Atlantis. I'm not quite sure what the timeline is, but wasn't that the idea, that Atlantis was destroyed but the three rulers kind of went out into other parts of the world, and then that influenced the development of cultures in those parts of the world or something? Well, that's kind of how I interpreted it. So I thought that kind of that kind of visual way of tying the different cultures, or the different worlds from these two games together, was really cool. I also really like, and this was something I didn't appreciate until I replayed it more recently, it's a very female dominated game. You know, you've got Lara, you've got the Lara duplicate, you've got Natla, you've got Amanda, and it's really about those four female characters. The only men in it are incidental, and you know, I really like that. That is so rare for a game to just say, yeah, we're not doing dudes. It's just a bunch of women in this game, you know, and to do that in a big gaming franchise that a lot of people are going to play. It's one thing for the little indie game or something that's going to have a smaller audience. It's one thing for that to do it, but to get it in a big game that you've got expectations are going to sell, well, to have it just be female dominated for a game, I thought was awesome. It was brilliant. So actually, I think that in the past I've maybe had some negative thoughts about the Legend series, or negative feelings, and actually having replayed all of them more recently, I do come away with very positive feelings. There's one or two issues that plague that series. You know, there's some controller issues, there's some combat issues, but they're not enough to ever sort of make the game frustrating to play, like Angel of Darkness is frustrating to play. I really enjoyed them. I'm surprised. Well, you know, they wanted to do an origin story, and they wanted to kind of like sort of take a different approach to how you actually play Tomb Raider, so I get the idea of doing a reboot, but I'm surprised that we've never had anything else, even if it's something smaller, in the Legend series. Because, you know, I wouldn't object to that. I wouldn't object to a game that maybe, or you know, like maybe some kind of smaller thing, like another Lara Croft game, but maybe not. You know what I mean? Not the Lara Croft games, because they in themselves have their own little thing, but something sort of on that scale, where it is set in the Legend universe, and you are, you know, hanging out with Zip and Alistair and all that. I think that would be kind of fun. It would be nice to go back to them. It would be kind of like bumping into old friends again. But that's not what Crystal Dynamics did. Crystal Dynamics decided for their next game they were going to take a very different approach. Tomb Raider open brackets 2013 close brackets was certainly a different approach. This is a game, of all the games that Crystal Dynamics have done, this is the one where I've had such conflicted feelings on, because you cannot deny for a second that this is a bad game. This is not a bad game. This is an incredibly fun, well made, well put together game. Is it Tomb Raider? Well, you know, I am going to at some point. I'm not going to do it right now because I've kind of been like sort of bogged down with Shadow for a lot of this year, where my sort of more recent Tomb Raiding stuff has been concerned. But at some point in the future, I'm going to play Tomb Raider open brackets 2013 close brackets, Rise, and then Shadow back to back, to see if there is more of a sense of an arc of Lara going from being in one place to another. Because I don't doubt there is, and I don't doubt that there was a bigger plan when they, you know, were initially putting this together. Because what time did... Hang on a minute, I'm going to check. Underworld came out in 2008, so that's a 5-year gap between the two. So, they probably did spend a lot of that time also working out story and character arc over the trilogy. So, probably you do have this feeling of she starts off as somebody who is young, naive, not really aware of what she's capable of, to get into Shadow where she's just throwing herself in danger and not even thinking about it. Although, you do still get the arc over the first game, there's you get to a point near the end of the game where it's like, what is it? It's a line the fans do actually love, where Lara's, shooting at the bad guys, and she says something like, "That's right, you bastards, I'm coming for you," something like that. And you do see some hints of darkness in Lara as well, even though she's not really a dark character in this one. There's a moment in this, and a moment in Rise as well, I think, where there's somebody who's maybe injured but not dead, and like, you the player don't have to actually kill them, but if you do kill them, Lara does come out with something like that. Oh god, I don't remember exactly what she said, but it's something to the sentiment of, "That's what you deserve, you bastard," or like something along those lines. So there is those hints of darkness in Lara, even at this in this game where you don't really think about it. I think the major problem I have with it is there's not really any tombs. There is some caves. There is some. You'd probably go more to say that they were crypts, or something, or there's not tomb raiding the way you think of Tomb Raider, and I think that's where a lot of people got hung up, that it's shanty towns that have been built by people who got trapped on the island in more recent years or decades, but it's not like Rise and Shadow, where you go into these old civilizations and you encounter people who live a different way of life to the typical sort of Western culture. So I think that's where people got hung up on. It doesn't. There's one point where you go into a World War II bunker and it's trying to convince you that that's a tomb, and that's not a tomb. And it's a shame that perhaps they didn't put a bit more effort into that aspect of the game, because I think if they had, overall Tomb Raider open brackets 2013 close brackets would have been thought of with a lot more fondness. I get the impression a lot of fans were just like, "I don't know what to make of this game," which is a shame, because like I said, it's a solidly made game. There's a good story there. There's a lot of great locations that you go to. The combat and the action was a lot more dynamic than anything we'd had in Tomb Raider up until that point. It is a good game. It just doesn't feel overly Tomb Raider, and that's the thing that I think a lot of people get hung up on. But that being said, when I did play it more recently, and I think. Oh, when I got my PlayStation 4, I saw the Tomb Raider Definitive Edition going really cheap, so I picked it up, and that's when I replayed it. That was about 2015. So that is now the game that I have. It's been the longest amount of time since I've played. So I will be looking forward to going back to it at some point and actually having a fresher perspective. But yeah, I just remember that conflicted feelings of just not knowing how to feel about it. There were some great, awesome moments, and then there were other times when it was like, yeah, but tombs. I want tombs. I want ancient civilizations. I want puzzles and challenges, and I just didn't feel like they were quite there in this game the way they would be better executed in Rise and Shadow. I love Rise of the Tomb Raider. I love it so much. I love the little Syrian thing right at the beginning is fun. But I think what I really like about Rise is the way it does go into a cold, snowy environment that's quite different from. I know we've occasionally gone into snowy places in Tomb Raider 3, there was the Nepal bit in Tomb Raider Legends, but to just have a game be consistently in that kind of snowy, cold, bitter environment, it was a lot of fun. It was nice to see that, Lara Croft dressing in layers instead of being like, oh, cleavage, oh, navel, oh, legs. She was covered up more, and there was more of a sense of having to struggle to survive in that kind of environment, in that initial section when she's separated from Jonah and she's having to build a fire and, you know, build the little shelter and all that, you know, there's more of a sense of this really is a dangerous environment to be in, because if she's not careful she's going to freeze to death. So I think that getting that sense of a danger of the environment again, but not in the sense of, oh, people are shooting at Lara, you know, in the sense of this is going to be a struggle to survive in the wilderness. You know, I really, really liked that. I liked the, you know, you did actually have locals that were part of an ancient civilization, as opposed to just, you know, being people who were stuck there and building shanty towns. I liked the relationship with Sophia. You know, that's when I started to really notice Lara's fondness for women. Or certainly she's somebody who, well, I know Lara's got a lot of male friends as well, so I don't think she's necessarily gravitates towards one or the other. You know, there's this idea that people are either heterosocials or homosocials, meaning that you either like to, in terms of friendships and socialising, you either gravitate towards people who are of the same gender as you or of the opposite gender of you. But I think Lara's very much bisocial. You know, she'll be friends with anyone, but there does seem to be a certain frisson between her and female characters, isn't there? But yeah, her and Sophia, there's that bit when Sophia's aiming an arrow at her and threatening to kill her, and it's like, oh my god, get a room, you two. You know, you could cut the sexual tension with a knife. But I never hear other people talk about this, so I'm wondering if this is just me seen through a certain lens. I don't know. But I liked that she actually had that thing to anchor her, that it wasn't just her going on an adventure and just being like, I'm going to do this thing because I want to do this thing. You know, she is a bit more conflicted because Sophia and Sophia's father, Jacob, are saying to her, no, you really don't want to do this thing. And she's like, no, I really do want to do this thing. And then she's like, oh no, I probably shouldn't do this thing, because she's thinking about somebody other than herself. And I actually like that, because you could accuse Lara of being quite selfish in a lot of her tomb raiding past, but I like that in this game there is more of a consideration to wider implications. The introduction of Trinity, well, actually, because I haven't played the definitive edition in a while, I don't know, I honestly can't remember if Trinity are in that game or if they're hinted in any way, but I remember Rise being the introduction of them. And you know, I feel like they've never really quite gotten down, like they never quite explored Trinity as well as they could have, or you know, what the bigger implications were, or you know, like they always just seem to be this mysterious, shadowy organisation that we never fully get an explanation of. But I did like Constantine and Anna and their kind of relationship. I feel like maybe it didn't get explored quite as much, and the relationship with Lara's father. Oh man, that scene when Lara's tied up and she realises that Anna's maybe not all that she thought she was, and then when she says it's a no fucking way, it's like, oh my god, Lara, yes. Like, be still my beating heart. And then she begins to drop the C-bomb, and then Constantine slaps her in the face. I mean, wow, that was I mean, if there's one thing you can always give Crystal Dynamics the thumbs up for, they know how to create an intense Lara moment for the audience, for the players, because you got that "where is my mother" bit at the end of Legend. You got this scene where she realizes that Anna has actually, you know, had ulterior motives for being a part of Lara's family, and then you've got that bit where Lara comes out of the water surrounded by the fire and shadow. I mean, they know how to give us the intense Lara moments, which, you know, I mean, it is kind of unfair to compare them to Core Design in that respect, because Core Design, for the most part, were making games at a time when you didn't really do that in storytelling, certainly with action adventure games, the way you do now. But wow, they really know how to bring the goods in moments like that. But I do feel like maybe Trinity, they could have been explored a bit more than they were, but they weren't. But yeah, I loved Shadow, and also just that feeling of, you know, they gave us tombs again, they gave us, and I actually really liked the approach of, you know, the optional tomb, you know, when you're ready and when you want to go do that thing. Like you can go down there and you can spend maybe half an hour down there solving puzzles and you know, getting prizes, and like they actually tied it into this idea of you're going down there to get ancient knowledge that will help Lara, you know, be a better fighter, be a better explorer, all that kind of stuff. So it was a kind of way of doing a level up system that actually made sense. You know, in Angel of Darkness, you kicked a door in and suddenly it was like, my legs feel stronger now. Maybe I can actually kick the other door down now, or something stupid like that. Whereas with the reboot games, you do actually feel like there's a reason why Lara's leveling up. There's a reason why Lara's getting better at this thing, because, you know, she's doing something, she's building up experience points, and then you can unlock a skill. Or you go into a tomb and you find this ancient knowledge of some kind, and it made the leveling up feel more logical than just kicking a door in. So, you know, overall, I thought Rise was a really solid, well-made game that actually felt like Tomb Raider. If 2013 was a solid, well-made game that kind of made fans feel quite conflicted or felt a bit weird or not quite sure how to respond to it, I think Rise was the one where it was like, yes, this feels like Tomb Raider again. And then we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the most recent game. Again, I really enjoyed it. It took me, as I did a very, very ridiculously long ramble about that game, so I don't need to necessarily go into massive details again, but, you know, like, as I said in that, I had a bit of a difficult time getting into it. I have an issue with third games in a trilogy where, you know, the first game's an interesting idea, the second game's, you know, polished and made into a really great game, and then the third game it's kind of like, yeah, I've done all this already. So it took me a wee while to get into Shadow and then fully appreciate it, but once I was there, I was there. I think it's a brilliant game. There is combat, but it's kind of pulled back to have more of a focus on exploration and puzzle solving and adventure and that kind of stuff. I love the locations that we go to. I love the kind of culture that is explored in this one. That it is something that feels very, very different to because with Rise, yes, it was a different culture and it would probably be unfair to refer to it as Western, but it still had a kind of Western look to it in certain aspects, whereas with the with Paititi and with the people in there, it just felt very different to what we were used to, and I actually really liked that. I liked that we heard different languages. Dominguez was a really interesting character because it wasn't, I'm a bad guy for the sake of being bad, you know, like, as much as you disagree with what he's actually doing and what he's trying to do, you kind of, you do kind of understand where he's coming from. The relationship, and actually this was when the whole Trinity and Lara's father thing kind of was a bit became a bit more interesting, I think, because it was what was it was like Lara's father was going to expose Paititi, so that's why Dominguez had him killed, which is kind of like, you know, I don't agree with them killing Lara's father, but you can understand the motivation. You can understand, like, because Dominguez is doing everything he does because he wants to look after Paititi. He wants to make sure it's safe. So even when you don't agree with anything he's doing, you understand why he's doing it, and that is the best kind of a bad guy. You know, like anybody can write a two-dimensional villain. When you actually understand motivation, even when you don't agree with it, that's when bad guys become interesting. Unaratu, oh god, I loved her so much. I was gutted when she got killed. I mean, a part of me was sort of like, I think I had that in the back of my head that she's not going to make it to the end of this game alive. You know, because when, I think it's because there was the son there as well. And it is a kind of storytelling thing that if there is a sort of young person who's destined to rule at some point in the story, they have to get to a point where they're actually taking a stand and you know, ushering in the victory because of their own choices rather than because their parent or mentor figure has told them to do it. You know, that at some point the hero has to stand on their own, even though, oh, what's the kid called? Etzli. Even though he's not the hero of this, he's not the hero of Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Lara is, but from the Paititi point of view, he is. But oh man, the frisson between the two of them. You know that scene when Unuratu's in her prison and Lara comes in to rescue her, and like the camera's up close on both of them, that creates a sense of intimacy. I mean, honestly, if the situation wasn't more dire, I think the two of them would have started kissing. I mean, it really did feel like that there was that kind of intense energy between the two of them. So I was gutted when she died. Of course, we have to also mention the moment when Lara just goes completely batshit insane. That is, I mean, again, it's that idea. Crystal Dynamics really know how to give us the intense moments. And I think that they absolutely earn that, because, you know, the whole build up to that moment, it's not just that you're playing the game and then Lara gets pissed off and starts killing everyone. It's like the whole build up to that for about, like, sort of 10-20 minutes of gameplay leading up to that. Like, the way, no, it's not. Yes, it is Rourke, the guy's name. The way he's teasing her that Jonah's been killed. The way the music, there's this wonderful drone sound in the soundtrack of this game that's very different to the kind of sort of brass and kind of dramatic music that you usually get in action adventure games. That instead it has this kind of dark tone to all of the combat and the situations in this game. And the way the mood just builds and builds and builds and builds till you get to that point where Lara's just had enough, and she rises out of that water with all the fire around her, and she just the way she just kills that first guy, or the first guy that she encounters, just very quietly and cleanly and calmly, which I do think is a kind of contrast. I don't know whether it was deliberate, but the way I perceive it is a contrast to the very first kill in open brackets 2013 close brackets, where she's panicked, where she's frightened, where she's struggling with this guy, and then the gun goes off. I mean, you could argue that she doesn't actually pull the trigger, that the gun goes off accidentally and blows this guy's head off. You know, the contrast between those two to really sort of highlight, without literally hammering the audience over the head with it, how much Lara has changed over the course of these 3 games. And then she just goes batshit insane and brings down a helicopter by the power of rage. And then that scene afterwards where she just kind of, she has her moment where she just kind of breaks and cries, and I think that's just such a, that whole section of the game is just such a powerful experience. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever encountered in a game. But it's not just that she cries, it's that she then kind of sort of metaphorically picks herself back up and you know, keeps going, because that's what Lara Croft does. No matter how difficult it gets, she keeps going. That whole sequence was just absolutely marvellous and just performed brilliantly. I mean, all of the acting in this game was just phenomenal, but Camilla Luddington just knocked it out of the park with those scenes. You know, like, I cannot imagine how difficult it is to act in a motion capture suit with this helmet and this camera hanging in front of your face to record all your facial features. It must be so difficult to just tune your mind out of that and then just give a great performance. So yeah, I really like Shadow, and I have to say I am a sucker for a story with a dark tone. Although usually in trilogies it's usually the middle chapter that's the dark story, whereas it really feels like Shadow, the third one's the dark story. But you know, again, the patching the ending to make the ending lighter, and it wasn't just lighter in the kind of sort of story sense, it's lighter literally. You know, the original was in quite a dark room, dark walls and all that, and then in the patched version it's a nice lit room. The walls are different colours, and everything just feels brighter and lighter, literally and metaphorically. So I do like that they actually did that, and there is more of a sense of closure. I don't know where they're going to go next. I don't even know if it's going to be Crystal Dynamics, because you do kind of get this impression that they are starting to kind of like sort of walk away from Tomb Raider a bit. You know, like, that might not necessarily be a bad thing, because like I know that with core design there was just this feeling of doing Tomb Raider game after Tomb Raider game after Tomb Raider game, never having any breathing space, never having an opportunity to just sort of step back and refresh their mind and you know, refresh the batteries and you know, have time to actually think about what they want to do with Tomb Raider next. And you can feel that, you know, you can feel that there's not really a lot of there's not any major new ideas. In doing the research for the Angel of Darkness reviews, I read a review that basically said that core design went from being a studio that was ahead of the curve, or a game changer where action adventure was concerned with the first game, to by the time they get to Angel of Darkness struggling to keep up with the competition. And like maybe Crystal Dynamics are aware of that, and they're kind of at a point now where they're like, that was our contribution to the Tomb Raider universe. We're going to step back while we're still on a high, and if Shadow ended up being the last game that they contributed to, because there was Crystal Dynamics, but there was Eidos Montreal that had a big part in making the game as well. But Shadow would be a game to go out on, absolutely, because it's a solid game. It's a solid Tomb Raider game. I really enjoy it. I love what they do with the story. I love what they do with the character. I hope that they continue to be in the universe of the reboot games, because you could. It's so easy to just jump forward 5 years and make Lara a bit older, a bit more experienced, and here's a new chapter of her life that we're going to look at. Because it is quite difficult. It's difficult when you're a fan and you're constantly, like, every couple of years it's like, okay, it's another reboot, it's another interpretation of Lara, I have to get to know her all over again. That can be difficult. So I hope they stick with this universe of Lara, but we'll see. I feel genuinely positive. There's been times in the Tomb Raider franchise that I felt a bit kind of like dispirited, or disappointed, or concerned, or worried. I was worried in the lead up to Legend because I'd been so disappointed by Angel of Darkness. I was worried in the lead up to Rise because I had very conflicted ideas on 2013, but I'm actually in this place right now where I'm genuinely very excited for what comes next. I don't know when we're going to find out when that is. I don't know if there's even a plan. I mean, there must be. You don't have a big franchise like Tomb Raider and then just let it go dormant. There must be plans. Somebody somewhere is making plans for a new Tomb Raider game. But I'm genuinely excited to see the future of Tomb Raider and to see where it goes from here. Oh, and just a final wee shout out to Lara Croft, the Guardian of Light, and the Temple of Osiris. What a brilliant wee idea to just do an isometric perspective Tomb Raider game. It's not technically Tomb Raider, it's technically Lara Croft, but you know what I mean. What a brilliant idea to just do a Tomb Raider game, but in a different kind of a style. I'm surprised there hasn't been another one of these. Guardian of Light came out 2010, Temple of Osiris is 2014, although I've actually only played it more recently. I'm surprised there hasn't been a third one. You would expect. It's not like there's been overarching stories in these games, so you have trilogies, or in the traditional sense. But I am surprised that there hasn't been another one, because I thought they were a lot of fun. It was fun to be with Lara, but doing it in a different way, to have a different approach, have a bit more of a sort of arcade approach to it, because that in the old games people used to take the piss, say, oh, it's an ancient tomb, oh, people haven't been here in centuries, and why is there shotgun shells at the top of this pillar, but that doesn't bother me with older games, to be honest, but that attitude has existed to such a point that you've got the reboot game where Lara has to make her weapons, she has to make her bow and she has to make her arrows. It was fun to just go back to a game like this where it was like, no, you're picking up items and you're picking up diamonds, and like if you collect so many of them, then your power meter gets boosted to that kind of sort of old fashioned or old school approach to computer games. It's really fun to just go back to something like that, and it is fun, I think, to play those games now and again where it is just about max up your power bar to the maximum, and then you can have supercharged attacks for a while. Like sometimes I think a lot of bigger games these days take themselves maybe a bit too seriously, you know. So it's nice to play something occasionally that's about fun, and just not taking itself 100% seriously. I mean, the people who make the game take it seriously in terms of making the game as good as possible, but in terms of what the player does, it's about having fun, and I really enjoyed that. And you know, also Keely Hawes back as Lara Croft is no bad thing. But yeah, I really enjoyed them. They were a lot of fun. You know, if in the interim they released another Lara Croft game, I'd probably be really happy about that and really excited to play it, because I remember actually the reason I didn't play Temple of Osiris for a while is because people said it was buggy and there was issues, and I even saw some videos where there was some weird, you know, like sort of animations, not like, so characters just kind of floated about the place because their animations weren't working properly or something. I played the PlayStation 4 version, did not have a single problem, and got kind of a bit obsessed with it, you know, like everything else got put on the back burner for a few days while I played this game, which, considering I was playing it while I was doing my master's degree, probably wasn't a good idea. But I had a fun few days playing that game, and got really obsessed. I remember it was something like 2 in the morning when I finally unlocked that final trophy, you know, getting the 100% on all the levels, because I just got really obsessed with, you know how sometimes you just get really zoned into a game and it's like, I'm not doing anything else until I finish this or until I achieve this goal. That's what I was like with Temple of Osiris. I got really, really into it. I really enjoyed it. The only thing was I was playing it on single player, so Lara was the only person on screen, and yet she was still having a conversation with all these other characters. But again, you know, it's like, you know, game's not taking itself too seriously. So I really enjoyed those Lara Croft games, and I really wish they would make another one, because they were both a lot of fun. You know, and any excuse to have Keely Hawes back as Lara again, you know.